We have the Ayatollah of fantasy rock and roll with us today, Adam Rank. How you doing, Rank?
They look great in person, and I just can't wait till next year where we can pack it full of 25,000.
Hey, Bob, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. I didn't know it was Ball Guys Day. It was being ranked. I mean, how can you lose?
This is the Dynasty Vipers ViperCast.
Hello and welcome back to the first day of fishing season. Okay, it's not quite the first day of fishing season, but it is officially the first day of redraft in your fantasy football leagues. This is better off known as the Scott Fishbowl 12 kickoff show, so to speak. Hey, as always, this is the Dynasty ViperCast here. Dynasty Vipers ViperCast, episode number 138, presented by the Fantasy Points Media Group. Take a second, head over there right now, subscribe, and use promo code VIPERS22 and get yourself 10% off that subscription right now, today. What better day to do it than during the kickoff of the Scott Fish Bowl? Now, we've got some exciting news going on. I've already finished off my Scott Fish Bowl draft. It was over on Sirius XM radio yesterday. I don't know how I feel right now. Not because of my team, but because I'm not making any more picks. I mean, sometimes we complain about not being able to make picks because of how long our draft is going.
Right.
Now I'm already done. This Scott Fish Bowl, this is one of those kind of long, slow drafts that can drag into 2-3 weeks. Major, you don't kick off until Saturday, I believe. What division is that? What's taking you guys so long? I mean, California time kind of moves a little bit differently, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's the LA division, but I'm gonna call it the Orange County because that's where we're actually having a draft, which is like maybe 45 to an hour away from me. So and I'm in the middle of like LA. I'm in West Hollywood. So it's not LA at all. It's OC, and I want them to fix that. But hey, we're gonna have fun. I think it's gonna be awesome. We have a lot of it's gonna be a dope situation.
Who do you got there for analysts? I mean, this is one of those unique type leagues right now where you get analysts, you get fans, you get, I mean, I use the term analyst, I use the term fan very loosely. I mean, there's a lot of smart fans out there, and there's a lot of analysts like me that don't really know what they're talking about. They just throw a bunch of stuff at a wall, sees what sticks. Major, who's in your division there that you kind of look out for?
So we have Chalk from the Undroppables. We have let's see who else is on here. Sports Illustrated, Michael Fobbs is on here. Who else is on here? Who else? Bob Harris is going to show up. Just trying to skim here. We have Jules from Fantasy Points is showing up.
You got to watch out for Jules McClain. She's one of the smartest people out there for this kind of stuff.
Right.
I mean, I know her name every year when the Scott Fish Bowl kind of winds down. She is near the top. And hey, again, you mentioned that fantasypoints.com relationship. Bob Harris, Michael Fabiano, both guys who've been on this show before, going behind the grind. I mean, Fabs is one of the best out there. Bob Harris is literally the best human being I've ever met. Because, you know, hey, us bald guys, we got to stick together. Ain't that right?
We have Tom Everett Scott as well, a celebrity on there. We have Kelly from Trophy Smack. It's at the Trophy Smack headquarters, so I'm pretty sure everyone from Trophy Smack is going to be there. Jeff Ratcliffe is going to be there. I mean, we just have some heavy hitters, dude. It's too many to name. Trent Jackson from Fantasy Football Dudes. Liz Loza from Yahoo is going to be there.
Doesn't this feel like he's already listed off like 40 names already? Isn't there only 12 people in the division?
It's going to be one of the most heavy hitters of all the live drafts. So I have to come prepared. So it's good that we're doing a show now so I can kind of take my notes from your draft and what Tara's doing and kind of kill this draft here, you know?
Well, we'll talk about that here in a second because I want to touch on that when we got a lot of expert versus a lot of fans and how those dynamics all play out because they play out very differently. Now, Tara, where are you at and where are you guys drafting right now? So I did see some pictures on Twitter already.
Sadly, I was not able to attend because I guess I can't have nice things, but it seems like they had, yeah. but it sounds like they had a blast. It was pretty cool because since they were drafting live, everyone there, because there were a few people, I was not the only one that wasn't able to make it. And so we were playing along live and going through the draft pretty quick. So we're already through. We're heading towards the end of round 6, which is pretty good for a day 1. So kudos to the Houston division for being the literal opposite of our division from last year, which was like almost second to last for my fiance division. But yeah, we've made it through the 8th pick in the 6th round, going pretty good. I guess we'll break the teams down as we go along here, but
Hey, so Tara,
it's
real
pretty
quick,
awesome. Yeah.
How does it work? So if you can't make it live, you can still draft on like remote with the people that's live, or is 2 separate?
So everyone that took their computers, or I guess maybe even phone, because you can do it from the app. So everyone was picking online in person, and then everybody else that was not in person was picking online as well. So it's just kind of coordinated, and it sounds like they had a good time, and we're getting through it pretty quickly. So yeah, it was like a live-ish draft that was still run through MFL.
Nice.
Basically, that sounds like when my kids get together and they bring their friends over. They're literally texting each other from their own cell phones 5 feet away from each other. I mean, that's basically what this draft turns into.
True.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, you got like Burl Jeffrey there, and Kate and Michelle. Are they in your division as well? And Jody Smith?
Just Michelle. I think Kate's like in the maybe Pittsburgh division or something. But yeah, it's a really good group of people.
Nice. I mean, this is what I love about this so much is all the different people getting together. I mean, this year more than any other year, the group chats have always been fun. The 108, 109, 103, whatever pick you're at, they always have those group chats going on. And then your actual division chats, those are usually pretty fun as well. But I got to know, because when we talk about this major, you've got a lot of heavy hitters actually lining up in your draft. And the one thing I noticed, because we've completed our draft, and it was basically one fan. I use that very loosely because Jonathan Sale, he's not a fan by any stretch of anyone's imagination. I mean,
yeah,
he basically held his own. He may have actually made a lot of us look pretty silly when it was all said and done. But we're sitting here in the Metropolis division there, doing a live draft on Sirius XM Radio Channel 87. And you had Shane Manila from DLF. You had Ray Flowers from XM Radio. I mentioned Jonathan Sale. Matt Jackson there over at Dynasty Happy Hour. You had Fantasy Impact's Pierre Wilson, FF Today's Doug Orth, who also is in the King Classic. Myself, football guys, Drew Davenport, another King's Classic kind of guy there. Second and Goal podcast, Calvin K. The dude's like 16 years old, but he's one of the smartest kids I've ever met out there. Again, another one of those people that is a lot smarter than I am. And then you had Fantasy Mojo, Darren Armani, another guy from the King's Classic. And then Dr. Roto was being represented there by Eric Romoff. So you basically had 4 of us in the same division, in the same draft, that draft against each other in Canton every year when we get together for the King's Classic. So we kind of all know each other a little bit. And I noticed the one thing about the all experts type league drafts, there's no surprises, so to speak. I mean, everyone has, it's almost like everyone follows the consensus rankings. There's not a whole heck of a lot because it's just the way it seems. And then, but the thing is that I love about the fan aspect, and Terry, you're probably getting this a little bit more than maybe myself, and what Major's going to see is those fans are unpredictable, which is what makes everything so great. I've seen some drafts out there. Now, there's been some errors and some mishaps. I've seen one draft, I think Brandon Cooks went 209. Brandon Cooks, not Dalvin Cook, but Brandon Cooks, the guy he took it in stride, so they're kind of going with it. There's another draft that they kind of fixed a little bit earlier where 102. There's some crazy selection that went off the board again. They fixed that. They rectified that. They gave the pick back. I mean, the biggest surprise in my draft right off the get-go was Kyler Murray going 101 to Shane Manila. When he went on XM Radio, he basically said, hey, this is a guy who was top 10 in fantasy production at the quarterback position, despite only playing in less than 15 games. He was the only guy in the top 10 that played less than 15 games and gave you top 10 production. You give yourself, in the back half of the season, after week 6, when DeAndre Hopkins comes back, Marquise Hollywood Brown, AJ Green, Zach Ertz, Kyler Murray is going to be sitting pretty good when it's all said and done. And really, when you're building these teams, yeah, it's great to have that consistency off the start of the season, but you need to build it for the long term. You need those guys, and that's why a lot of these roster constructions have had rookie players, 2-3 rookies, are the ones that seem to go a little bit deeper in the Scott Fish Bowl playoffs, because that's when they typically start hitting their stride, week 8, week 9, as far as rookies are concerned. Now, Tara, what have you seen early on in the Houston division so far? Anything really shocking you right now, catching you off guard, or is it kind of playing the way you thought about it before heading into it?
No, we don't really have a lot of surprises, honestly. Everyone's pretty much going on schedule. Tight ends are falling at a pretty good rate. Wide receivers aren't going aggressively outside of ADP. Quarterbacks is what no, I mean, we've got a pretty normal division going on here. No big shockers or surprises here. Decent value coming along. Yeah, I wish I could share something crazy, but man, everyone in here is drafting really good. Really good.
So where are you picking right now? What's your draft slot?
So I'm at the 5th spot, which has oddly enough resulted in literally each person that I've wanted to pick being picked right before me. So like a little low-key frustrating now. I went with Lamar Jackson in the first round because we did have the first 7 picks were quarterbacks. So we had Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, Kyler Murray went before Patrick Mahomes. So we're seeing that kind of like the Kyler Murray jump that a lot of people are believing. And so Patrick Mahomes at the 104. And at that point, I mean, really kind of the 105 and really the 106 are kind of weird spots where you have options to say, okay, am I going to go with a guy like Lamar Jackson, a guy like Joe Burrow, or am I going to go ahead and jump in and start off that kick for running back and go ahead and get my Jonathan Taylor? I'm not seeing a lot of people that are really taking Cooper Kupp that early. Travis Kelce fell a little bit too at the 112. So for me, I just wanted to go ahead, get my quarterback out the way, and I mean, you got to go with Lamar Jackson at that point at the 5th spot. Coming around. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I got Lamar Jackson at the 108. And like your draft, 10 of the first 12 picks in the first round were all quarterbacks. Then on top of that, basically after that first round, we had Justin Jefferson, Travis Kelce, and then Derek Carr and Jalen Hurts kind of went. And I was stuck in that position at 205 of the second round, staring at, do I go Stafford? Do I go Cousins? Do I grab that second quarterback? Do I go running back Najee Harris, Austin Eckler, or do I grab Cooper Kupp? And the way I kind of look at that is I already got Lamar Jackson, who I feel is going to be a top 3 quarterback this upcoming season. I want to get guys who are going to be top 3 in their position. I mean, that's kind of the way I feel is going to win things. So I'm looking at these quarterbacks. Jalen Hurts basically went off the board. He was the 12th quarterback selected right before my selection. So the next quarterback selected would be the 13th best quarterback. Or do I grab what I feel is one of the top 3 wide receivers in Cooper Kupp? Even with a 25% regression rate, he is still going to be the top 3 wide receiver this season compared to what his last year numbers were. So for me, I went with the risk and grabbed a wide receiver at 205 to see how the rest of the board would fall out. Now, when you got back up there at your selection there, the second selection of the second round, where were you leaning?
So before I jump into that, I'll say like your first 3 picks, Matt, were extremely good value.
Yeah. I really like your team, man. We might need to break that down a little bit, but keep going, Tara.
I mean, even Keenan Allen too. I mean,
Right.
then Kittle, like you got
Exactly.
really, really good value. Like everything fell to you at perfection. And then you, as the smart analyst that you are, made the correct picks. So you really lined up the top portion of that draft like ridiculously good. And set some unrealistic expectations since I couldn't get Swift at all, but whatever. But so when I came around, and this is where my heartache is. When I came around to my second pick at the 208, I was convinced that I was going to be able to pair up Mark Andrews with Lamar Jackson. I was sitting there watching every single pick. It was, let's see. Yeah, Jalen Hurts was the 12th quarterback. So it was Jalen Hurts, then Christian McCaffrey, then Joe Mixon. And there was one pick right before mine. And I really, really thought that it was going to be a running back. And no, of course not. And I typically wouldn't take a tight end in that situation, but you in a tournament like this, to have a stack like that, if it panned out, would have been a ridiculous advantage that I did not get to achieve. Thank you to fan in our division, Rick. Really appreciate that.
Hey, but
Fantastic.
Sarah, real quick, run down your first 4 picks. I want to see. I want to
Yes.
compare it to Matt's 4 picks.
So first was Lamar Jackson. So I got Lamar. So
Same,
he
okay.
getting, yeah. Again, he's getting the value there. Then I went with Derrick Henry, which was interesting because he fell. So he was the 5th running back off the board, and at that point, when comparatively to making that choice between going with Derrick Henry and Cooper Kupp, that was the decision for me. I just went ahead and went with Derrick Henry. Go ahead and knock that RB1 out of the park, hopefully. My next pick in the 3rd round was Aaron Jones, and then my 4th pick was Mike Evans.
I don't mind that at all. I like that
Yeah,
start. We know what
that's
Aaron Jones is going to
yeah.
be. Jones may not get the runs that he had last year, but he's going to get more production in the passing game. And with this being basically a half-point PPR type league, I mean, that has some significant value. And that's one of those things that kind of, going back to DeAndre Swift. DeAndre Swift wasn't my first selection there of the 3rd round. I really had my heart and soul set on Joe Mixon. And he is my number 3 running back this season for redraft. And right before I got a chance to pick him, right before 305, at 304, Joe Mixon went off the board. And I was like, okay, you know what? I guess DeAndre Swift is a good value here because I think this Detroit Lions offense is going to be low-key explosive this year with all the weapons they've kind of added around there. Take a little bit more of that attention off DeAndre Swift. He may not get the runs, like very similar to Aaron Jones, splitting carries with Jamal Williams. We've seen that last year with Williams and Swift split a lot of the carries, but there's value in that PPR type, those pass catches, those extra bonus points that you get there. Now, Major, you're kind of watching this. You've seen Tara's lineup. You've seen mine lineup. Anything really shock you so far about how these drafts have been playing out here? With mine in particular, that's a Metropolis division.
I really like what you guys both did. It looked like you guys went, quarterback, receiver, running back, receiver. Is that right, Tara? Did you do that? Or did you go?
He doubled up on receiver. I doubled up on running back.
Yeah. So it feels the same a little bit. I don't know how, but it feels like you guys kind of ended up with like the same type of player. And I think Tara was coming from the 5 and you're coming from the 8th. And I think when I signed up, I'm coming out of the 9th spot. So we'll see how it works out when I get there. But most likely I'm drafting out of the 9th spot because that's my favorite number. But I think I'm going to pretty much kind of stay true because I think you guys both kind of killed those first 4 picks.
Now, quick question, Matt.
Go ahead, Tara.
So where did Joe Mixon come? Because I'm kind of curious. I want to see. I want to point out a little bit of difference in drafts. Where did Joe Mixon come off the board?
Right before DeAndre Swift, like literally right before me. So 304.
See, and that's what people kind of have to like be prepared for in terms of how your draft loads. The position that goes in the 2nd round versus the 3rd round is going to vary drastically if people start to go on different kinds of runs. Joe Mixon went at the 204 or 206 in mine. So almost the exact opposite in terms of like maybe being the 2nd round versus 3rd round. And that's so funny. That's so funny how I think maybe so in the 2nd round where wide receivers hit more than running backs for you.
For us here in the 2nd round, we had, I think it was something like 4. By the time the 2nd round ended, Derrick Henry was the 5th running back selected. Whereas we only had, for the wide receivers, Cooper Kupp was the 2nd wide receiver through 2 rounds. So going to the 3rd round, we actually had more running backs selected than we had wide receivers. And the one thing I noticed here, when you have 14 quarterbacks going in the first 2 rounds, that is pushing a lot of that value back down the board. Now, I've seen some drafts where not everyone ends up with a quarterback in the first 2 rounds. I've seen some drafts where they're grabbing their QB7 in the 3rd and 4th round. I mean, this is where you have to pay attention to how your draft is unfolding.
That was me last year.
Yeah, well, look what happened to you last year. You ended up with Trevor Lawrence and some other schmuck there in your lineup, Carson Wentz.
Carson Wentz, yeah.
I ended up almost doing the same thing because the value of this draft just kept coming. The players, the talented skill players just kept getting pushed down the board because everyone was jumping in on the quarterbacks. So I was left here looking at my draft, looking at about round number 8. I didn't have a 2nd quarterback yet. And I'm like, okay, I've literally just watched Mac Jones, Zach Wilson, Ryan Tannehill, Jared Goff already come off the board. And now I'm almost in panic mode, but I couldn't go ahead and reach for a quarterback as value kept falling down the board. So I sat there and I took my chance there. We talked about Keenan Allen. I chose him over Mike Evans. I had that option there. And then the 5th round, George Kittle in a tight end premium league. I don't grab tight ends early ever. I always said to myself, I said, if George Kittle falls to the 4th, 5th round, okay, maybe that's time where I'll look about drafting a guy like this. Thinking full out, 3rd round, the top 5 tight ends are probably coming off the board. But George Kittle and Darren Waller fell. Drew grabbed Darren Waller right before me again at 504. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to grab George Kittle here at 505. Typically, I would have sat back, waited the 7th, 8th round, maybe grab some other guys. But I looked at this. The only other position I would have considered there was quarterback. But the value at the quarterback position wasn't there for the 5th round when you look at some of these other players. So after George Kittle came off the board, in the 6th round, I reached for one of my guys.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in Brandon Cooks. I talk about, and if you're going to talk the talk, you better walk the walk. And I was kind of trash talking. So we did our live draft, but we did it on StreamYard. So we're all watching each other as we're doing the draft. We got the radio going on. Guys are getting pulled from the stream to talk on the radio. And I said to myself right off the get-go, and I've posted this on Twitter multiple times, and you know how much my mouth gets me in trouble on Twitter from time to time on my predictions. I believe that Brandon Cooks is going to score more fantasy points than A.J. Brown. And I firmly believe that because that target share is going to be there. Davis Mills is a 68, 67% passer when it comes to a completion percentage. I like that combination. So for me, Brandon Cooks at 608 didn't feel like a reach, but when you look at some of these other drafts that are going on, you're going to see Brandon Cooks in the 7th, 8th, probably even the 9th round, depending on how these drafts unfold. But for me, that felt like good value. And then at 7, I hadn't grabbed my second running back yet. 705, I'm looking at Antonio Gibson. I'm not big on Antonio Gibson, but in the 7th round, again, I couldn't pass up some of the other guys that were up on the board that I could have selected. I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh man, I don't really want Antonio Gibson, but the value is just screaming to me at this point. Now, Tara, was there any time here?
I'm sorry, real quick. Who was on the board? Because I think you kind of reached for Cook a little bit. Who was still on the board before that pick?
So if I'm reading this round, the 3rd round reversal always messes with me a little bit when I look at the board here. I left some good players on the board to grab my guy. So if we're looking at the 6th round, I think that means 6. We're going the other direction here. I left guys like Breece Hall, Mike Williams, J.K. Dobbins. So Breece Hall, I don't mind him, but Tara basically threw a TikTok video out there that says don't draft any Jets players. So I decided to avoid any Jets players. Mike Williams.
I don't believe that.
Like, thanks,
so
Tara.
when Breece Hall outscores Brandon Cooks, I'm coming back to Tara on that, blaming her for it. Then we had Mike Williams. I like Mike Williams, but I'm not in love with Mike Williams. I think you're going to get big weeks from Mike Williams. I think you're going to get dead weeks from Mike Williams.
Always,
and I don't want to risk when we get to the playoffs having one of those dead weeks out of Mike Williams, especially when I've already got Keenan Allen on my roster. So that played a factor into that. J.K. Dobbins, I don't think we have the full medical report on J.K. Dobbins because everything I'm hearing right now is he's not as far ahead as what he should be at this point, which means there's probably a lot more that was going on in that knee than what we were led to believe. And then Elijah Mitchell kind of came off the board. He came off, I think it was at 701. So I felt pretty good by the time I got back to Gibson. Jared Goff came off there as the whatever quarterback that was by that time. And then Schultz and Goddard came off before Antonio Gibson. So I don't feel like I left a whole lot on the table jumping up an extra round early to grab Brandon Cooks when I look at the guys that were all there. Maybe I go Breece Hall there. Maybe I grab that second running back earlier and then see what kind of falls down to me for the wide receivers. Because after Antonio Gibson, some of the wide receivers that were on the board that I could have grabbed in the 7th are guys that I like Marquise Brown, DK Metcalf, Chris Godwin. These are guys that are going in the 7th round. Now, Godwin, I'm hearing mixed reports. He sounds like he's going to be ready for training camp. I don't quite buy that 100% because of when he had that ACL injury. I figure he's going to be looking at more of a November type return there, which is still, hey, if you get him ready for November, that's good enough for your playoff push. DK Metcalf, he had a good relationship with Geno Smith last year. Geno fed him because, I mean, he was the top option. I did get Tyler Lockett a little bit later in the draft. I don't know how I feel about that because Lockett and Geno Smith had one good game of the 4 that they played together, which kind of boosted those numbers up. Now, Tara, when you look at your construction here through 6 rounds, is there any player that you feel that you got good value on, or is there someone that maybe you reached a little bit too early on?
So before I do that, I just want to say I'm 100% with you on Brandon Cooks, and I literally sat there at the let me pull up my draft board at the 6:05, debating whether I wanted to reach for him or not because I've got a lot of because I've done a lot of mock drafts. I'm mock drafting like literally every single week, and I have gotten some crap comments from people regarding the way I will reach for Brandon Cooks. And I think a lot of people don't realize if you actually pull the statistics of back when Davis Mills came back from his injury and returned as the full starter, the connection with Brandon Cooks was incredible. He averaged 18 fantasy points in PPR, which would statistically make him right on that cusp of being a wide receiver one. I think that people are really underestimating what that connection is going to be and the reliability that Brandon Cooks has had and how pretty good Davis Mills can actually be in this offense and how he's going to have the opportunity to do that for the entire season because let's be honest, who else are they going to turn to? So 100% agree with you on that one. I would have loved to take him, but I ended up taking Terry McLaurin because I sat there and thought about it long and hard. And people don't give Carson Wentz enough credit from a fantasy perspective, what he was able to do for Michael Pittman last year. And all
I had
things
him last
considered,
year, and it wasn't. No, he was not.
Michael Pittman or Carson Wentz?
Wentz. I had him last year.
Yeah.
He was my flex. He was my super flex, and it wasn't really spectacular.
But what he did for Michael Pittman was
Gotcha.
good. Because
Carson
Wentz, unfortunately, the things that he does kind of knocks him out, but it doesn't really affect his lead wide receiver as much as it does from a fantasy perspective. From a team perspective, from a game perspective, yeah. Good luck, Washington. But from a fantasy perspective, I don't think we need to fear Terry McLaurin that much because I think we're looking at a very similar, if not better, because I do think that Terry McLaurin has a lot more upside from an explosive perspective. So I think really the opportunity is there for Terry McLaurin to step up and have a wide receiver one type of finish this season with Carson Wentz.
I think this is a good, healthy debate. I'm going to let Major kind of ring on this because I had that same choice. Terry McLaurin went right after my Brandon Cook selection or right before. I can't tell anymore because the way drafts all the third round reversal really, like I said, messes with me. So McLaurin and Cooks went right after one another, no matter how you want to look at it. And I thought about Terry McLaurin as an option, and I'm sorry, I had to go against the size factor here. Carson Wentz seems to have good success with big body wide receivers, whether that is guys like Alshon Jeffrey, where he had success. Michael Pittman, he's a big boy there catching passes. I worry about Terry McLaurin's size somewhat here. Now, Brandon Cooks is not a big guy by any stretch of anyone's imagination, but it didn't seem to affect Davis Mills. I worry about a little bit of the accuracy type things there with Carson Wentz. And like you said, I really like, if you take those 10 games in which Davis Mills started, he would have set the NFL rookie record for completion percentage. And I don't think that could be oversighted. 68% is what that number would have been. I don't care if you're a 10-year vet. I don't care if you're a rookie. 68% completion percentage is pretty darn good. So we put that in there. Plus, I think Cooks is going to end up with 150 targets when it's all said and done, too. I think he could have a 25% target share. I think he had 23, 22% last year. I mean, targets equal production, half PPR, give me some receptions. Plus, why do we hate good things in fantasy football? Why do we always have to continually disrespect very good, capable players? We're talking about a wide receiver who's basically had 5 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons with 4 different teams.
Right.
Like, what more do you want Brandon Cooks to do? Oh, he's injury prone. No, he's not. He's played 113 out of the last 117 games. That means he's been healthy 93% of the time over the last, 5 years, 117 games divided by 17. I don't know what the number is. This is not a math show. I'm not on trial here for my mathlete kind of numbers here, but that's pretty good. Availability is your best ability from time to time, and he's going to be in that lineup. Now, any day, any guy can take a shot that's putting him up for the year, and that's kind of why we go deep 22 in this thing. So, Major, up to you here. Are you going Terry McLaurin, or are you going Brandon Cooks? Because that seems to be the same kind of conversation that both Terry and I faced here simultaneously.
I'm a scary Terry stan. That's just where I lean, but I love Houston. garbage time in fantasy football, I think, is so underrated. People do not give enough credit to garbage time. And Houston is going to be playing from behind a lot. So therefore, they're going to be throwing the ball a lot more than everyone else. The only thing I do have a little pushback on Cooks is because I think those young receivers are going to start to kind of make a name for themselves this season. So I really like gosh, who's the kid that got last year from Michigan? What's his name?
There's
Nico
Nico
Collins.
Collins, and
Yeah,
then they drafted
I really
Mechie
like
this season.
Nico and wait, what's the other one?
Mechie, John
Yeah,
Mechie.
I really like Minchie. That's one of my guys that I'm drafting in every one of my dynasty drafts. So I think they have a lot of weapons there. The running game is still not where I think it needs to be. So again, they're going to throw the ball a lot. So you still may get that 150 targets you were just talking about from Cooks. But yeah, I love Houston. I like what they're doing there. To me, it feels like Houston is kind of like on that verge where Miami was a couple years ago when they had all that young talent and it just wasn't really ready yet. And now you see all that stuff kind of coming to fruition now. But I'm really into picking everyone from Houston, especially the receivers, because again, garbage time, playing from behind, they're going to throw the ball a lot, and I think they like that quarterback they have out there. So I'm all in Houston.
I think it's important for people going into the Scott Fish Bowl right now, when they have their rankings, to have them set up in tiers, right? I think that's the most important thing. Because one of the biggest things I'm seeing here, especially at the running back position, Tara, I know you went with Aaron Jones. I know I went with DeAndre Swift. But there's also another few running backs that are in that same tier here. If we're looking at the third, fourth round type value players, Dalvin Cook falls into that. Nick Chubb, Javonte Williams, Saquon Barkley, he's up there. Alvin Kamara is going in the fourth round as RB14. Now, I was in with the Bob Harris there. I know you were in with Bob Harris too, doing some draft magazines there, the Pro Forecast, the Diehards magazine. In the first installment there, that's on bookshelves right now, I ended up going with Alvin Kamara, and I think he went off the board as RB12. In our draft, he went off as RB14. And I stated there is not 11 better running backs in the National Football League than Alvin Kamara. And here he is in our draft going as RB14. Shame on me because I went with DeAndre Swift. I feel comfortable with that. But how would you kind of rank these guys? Who stands out the most of that kind of that tiering group there for you?
So I get what's going on with Alvin Kamara because we're almost guaranteeing a 6-week suspension, and we have zero clue when it is. If you told me for sure it would be 6 weeks at the beginning of the year and he'll be back at XYZ time, I'm like, okay, feel more comfortable with that. I'm a little bit skeptical of what happens because the trial's in August, what happens if this suspension hits and aligns with the back half of your fantasy season into the playoffs. So for me, that's why he drops a little bit more. But yeah, talking about tiers, when you look at that, I think the break right there is, and I went with Aaron Jones just because I think he probably sits in the next tier. I would cut off right at DeAndre Swift, but unfortunately was not able to grab him. And then sometimes you got to do the math on those things on whether or not to push someone up into another tier. And I think that the thing that you really have to key in on is a lot of these guys that are kind of sitting at the second tier towards the end right there that are going in the third round, they're heavy PPR backs. You see Saquon, we're not drafting him because we think he's going to have a whole bunch of 100-yard games in that Giants offense. Although, Saquon obviously has the capabilities, but the upside that we're looking there is the pass catching with the Giants being such a bad team, as we've talked about. DeAndre Swift, very aggressive pass catching back as well. Aaron Jones, pass catching back. These guys that are kind of falling into that section, and I think maybe it kind of cuts off with Travis Etienne. And I see a few people kind of reaching on that, but those guys right there that are kind of cutting off that second tier, those heavy PPR backs, are those guys that you're drafting as an RB2, but you have the potential to have them finish in possibly the top 5 as RB1s. So I think that's kind of what you got to look at in terms of what you're looking at. Are you looking for that safe option like a Nick Chubb? Or are you looking to jump up into a tier and get guys that have the potential to finish as top 5 backs?
I like how you said that because I sat there when I went with DeAndre Swift. It wasn't just a easy decision to make. Like I said, I had my heart set on Joe Mixon. That was my one guy that's above everyone else on that tier. I only had a 1 minute clock. Our clock was only a 1 minute thing because we were live on Sirius XM. So we only had 1 minute to make this decision. And I'm going through my Rolodex here in my head. DeAndre Swift. I'm going through my Rolodex here. Javonte Williams, Saquon Barkley. These are all guys I absolutely really believe are high up end type players here. Javonte Williams, 1,000 yards darn near rushing last year, plus another 300 yards in the passing game. PPR move. Saquon Barkley, I think, is a potential league winner in this setup. I mean, a guy you're getting here, obviously in the third round, this was 312. This was pick 312. So he could go as early as in mid-second. He could drop to the fourth, depending on where that value gets pushed down. He's that guy in this Giants offense. We talked about strength of schedule, whether you want to believe it or not. The strength of schedule sets up very favorably for this New York Giants team. If Daniel Jones is having success, there's weapons there in the passing game. Shepard, who's going to probably take a few weeks to get back. Kadarius Toney, Wan'Dale Robinson, Kenny Galladay, Darius Slayton. These are all guys that can rotate in, passing, throwing the ball, and all this other fun stuff. Saquon Barkley doesn't have to be full-out beast mode to be productive, but I tell you right now, I look behind Saquon Barkley, Matt Breida, Joshua Corbin. There's nobody behind Barkley.
Matt Breida's he's a good runner. I don't think he gets enough credit because he never
You
really
can like him all you want, but I don't even think he had more than 15 carries last year.
He didn't have opportunity, but when he gets the ball, he balls out. So like I see him having a bigger footprint than we think.
He did displace Zach Moss.
Face.
So it's saying a lot, huh? I'm just kidding.
Yeah, well,
wow, disrespectful.
We look at this thing. I mean, you look at touches. Najee Harris, I think, led the league last year. He had an insane amount of touches, and he was able to turn that into some points with a pretty low yards per carry average, might I add. I mean, that was a lot on the Pittsburgh offensive line if had hurt him there, but he had 74 receptions, I think, on 94 targets. I mean, I don't think that's impossible to expect something very close to that for Barkley. Maybe 60 receptions, maybe 84 targets. I think could possibly be there. But I think I really like Barkley as that high upside type player. If you feel like taking a little bit of risk, because we know the Scott Fishbowl, no risk it, no biscuit. You kind of have to take a shot here and there on some of these players. Yeah. Now, speaking of some of these players, Major, you've kind of seen some of these drafts kind of pro out there. If you go to spikeweek.com there, they got all this ADP. I mean, Josh, he does an absolutely good job putting it all together. You can look at every team's roster construction right now. You can see Major's drafted nobody. You can see Tara's full thing. You can see mine. It doesn't matter. You can pretty much type in anyone's Twitter handle and boom, their lineup will pop up. And you can also see who's drafting who, where their ADP is going. I mean, it's fantastic to kind of play around on that. Major, we've had a few drafts kind of get into rounds 12, 13. We've had mine obviously finished. We've got some that haven't even started like yours. Who are some Scott Fishbowl winning type players that you're looking at right now?
You mentioned him a few times. I think Joe Mixon is going to have a huge year. That offense, everyone's worried about Chase and the other on that team. I think he's going to be running against like a 5-man box because they're going to have to double team Chase. They're going to have to like kind of bracket Higgins. And then people kind of forget about Boyd as well. And then they also added a tight end to the mix too. So I think Mixon is going to have an opportunity. And I was just reading the other day that the coach said they want to use him more in third downs because he's a good receiving back and all that stuff as well. So I think he's primed to have one of those seasons that can like take people over the top. I think you kind of reach for Cooks a little bit, but I do like Cooks in the fact that he is the man out there. The other two receivers are really young, so I think they're going to lean on Cooks to carry that load out there in the receiving game. Who else is out there? I like Wiggins because I think that he's going to do a lot of underneath stuff, and I think Hill's going to take a lot of pressure off of him. I think Hill's going to get those double teams, like stretching the field, and I think he's going to do a lot of crossing routes and stuff underneath. So he's going to have a lot of targets, especially in the PPR league. I think he's going to have those targets. I think we have to find it. I think a tight end could win this league for people. Last year, tight ends were kind of disappointing. I think we're going to see a correction at this year, especially with it being a tight end premium league. I think we're going to get some tight ends that's going to, I don't know, come out of nowhere and kind of like help people out. And I think that with the addition of Baker Mayfield, I really like Tommy Tremble. That's one of my guys last year. I drafted him everywhere. He's more of a blocking back, but I haven't really used him as a receiver yet. But I think he's one of those guys who can take a huge leap this year, especially with Baker Mayfield under center.
I like to kind of mention the tight ends there because there's some pretty good ones that I got a little bit later. We always joke with this. Tara, I mean, we both are big Irv Smith Jr. fans. I mean, he's one of my Dynasty mustaches. Tara's hyped him up for a couple of years. Unfortunately, the hype has not met production yet, right? We just haven't quite seen that. So, Tara, who's one of those Scott Fishbowl winning type players that you're looking at?
Yeah, we could say Irv Smith, but I think I think there's value in, okay, so let me start off by saying that if you look back at that Spike Week app, one of the things that you can look at under ADP is not just the average ADP, but the max and the min. And if you take a look at the tight ends, if you look at Travis Kelce, if you look at Mark Andrews, you can see a ridiculous amount of variation between where these guys are going. You can see where Travis Kelce was taken as high as second and as low as 22nd overall. Same thing with Mark Andrews. It was as high as 7th and then as low as 27th so far. So what I see is that there's a lot of value. I think Major's kind of leaning into that as well, that people are kind of looking at the tight ends and they're probably being a little bit more skeptical, even though these guys can actually go out there and win leagues. And I think their values are getting depressed down a little bit because we were seeing last year where there were often three tight ends that were going in the first round. And I think that if we kind of pay attention to these low end tight ends who can really go out there and maybe have that kind of Dalton Schultz kind of season. Right. You mentioned Irv Smith. That's somebody who can be a big candidate there. But I think what people should be looking at late, you might want to take a look down there in Tampa Bay. I know a lot of people are saying, let's go ahead and draft Cameron Brate. I don't know if that's the guy that you want to be drafting. We've seen a lot of Cameron Brate. He's been a well-established player within the NFL. And despite multiple opportunities, despite having opportunities when Gronk was out last season, we have not seen anything spectacular from him. I think we know exactly what we're getting out of Cameron Brate, and it's not going to be anything that's going to win you your league. It's very possible that Cade Otton somehow comes in there and it's sounding like he's going to get an opportunity to compete with Brate for reps. And if he can make that kind of connection with Tom Brady, who is obviously going to be missing that red zone presence from Gronk, maybe he can give you some upside there as late round value in a tight end premium league. So that's somebody that I'm looking at later. And hopefully none of my league mates are listening to this and go ahead and do that. But Cade Otton is someone who you can look at late, trying to find that really late value for tight end that can give you an upside as a top 10 finisher.
Question for both of you guys. Did you go into this with a certain strategy, like I'm going quarterback, running back, receiver, whatever, or did you just let the draft come to you? What was like your strategy going into the draft?
I had a strategy going in. I was coming out with two quarterbacks in the first 3 rounds. Yeah. Then I got punched in the mouth and my strategy changed. I mean, I had full intention going quarterback, or quarterback.
Right.
But Cooper Kupp being there at 205, that changed that quarterback in the second round. And then I just sat there. I'm like, okay, well, by the time I got here in the third round, my top quarterback options were Trey Lance and Tua Tagovailoa in the third. I'm like, I can't justify either one of these guys where I'm standing at in the third round. Now, Tua I like in the fourth. Trey Lance I like in the fourth. Right. But that value just wasn't there, especially when I'm looking at guys like DeAndre Swift, Saquon Barkley, Javonte Williams. So then my strategy basically changed completely. And I sat there and I had to wait until the 8th round, the 10th round to grab that QB2, QB3, which happened to be Baker Mayfield as the QB 24 overall. And then Daniel Jones at QB 28 overall in the 10th round, which I think could be a very sneaky play. Yeah. If you're looking for one of those quarterbacks to kind of come out of nowhere, good strength of schedule, it's favorable. He could be one of those quarterbacks that could help you win your league. Not saying he will, but he could give you that kind of production in that super flex position. Now, Tara, what about you for strategy going in versus where you're at right now?
Side note, Daniel Jones is technically a running quarterback in theory. So
that sounded so nasty. I'm not buying that one.
Well, he may trip over his own feet, but he is technically those fantasy points are coming on the ground versus through the air.
I was doing the research. I did lots of research, and I think it was something Sam Darnold and Daniel Jones and Zach Wilson all had rushes greater than what Austin Eckler was able to do last season at any point. So I'm just going to throw that out there. Now, Tara, back to you here on your strategy.
My strategy, I actually did stick pretty closely to my strategy. I would have adjusted it if Mark Andrews had fallen to me, then I would have had to kind of make a little bit of a pivot. But I went into it planning that more than likely I was going in and getting a quarterback first round. And I wanted to also have 2 solidified running backs, whether that came in the second and third or the second and the fourth. It was highly unlikely that I was coming out of the first 4 rounds without 2 running backs, because the problem with this level of depth in a league is that it's a lot harder to find those guys on waivers that are going to be those running backs that come in and have the opportunity to push you to a league winner, because a lot of those guys are already going to be on somebody's bench. Like, for example, in my league last year, I remember Elijah Mitchell was already on someone's team. That was not a waiver wire pickup. So that was one that was already drafted. So with that said, I feel like you want to be really solidified at both quarterback and running back. And you can push wide receiver down a little bit, because you can find value as you get into those mid rounds and, go out there and get yourself a mid-round Cooper Kupp like a lot of people did last year. So for me, I stuck to my guns pretty much. Went quarterback, running back, wide receiver. And Matt, here's where, you and I have this struggle with tight ends and wanting to not draft a tight end, wanting to go late with these late round values, which is awesome in theory. And I typically like to do, but the only problem is that I was a little bit traumatized last year it was really difficult to recover from my whiff on Robert Tonyan as late round.
Same here.
And I think I was able to end up getting Cole Kmet, and but still, it's just not enough to help you out in a tight end premium league where you've got
you get this
guys.
year?
I went ahead in the 5th round and got Dalton Schultz. He fell to tight end 7. To me, that was really good value, because despite the whole contract extension thing, the reality is that Dallas Goedert is not good. It's not a fear of if he's going to play or not. Dallas Goedert is not going to sit on having literally one good year and think that that's going to be a good career move for him. I get that he wants the extension. Personally, if he doesn't get that extension, that probably motivates him a little bit more to have another good year. But I still feel pretty comfortable when you look at that Dallas offense. And this is my guy who I think is probably my best value pick out of these first 6 rounds. In my opinion, because when you look at that Dallas offense, we've got the exit of Amari Cooper. We've got CeeDee Lamb stepping up to that wide receiver 1. We've got Michael Gallup, who we know who he is, but the problem is that he yet again is coming off of an injury, and it's very probable that he's not going to be able to start the season healthy. So we might be waiting a month, maybe 2 again on him. So when you look at that and you compare to last year in the way that Dalton Schultz was able to step up and provide a nice base level of targets there for Dak, I think he's going to be able to do that again as the second look to CeeDee Lamb. So I think that's going to play out. I think we're looking again at a situation where he can repeat as a top 5 finisher in PPR. And with this being tight end premium, I think it'd be a really good value to be able to grab him at the 508.
So you went in the 5th round, Matt. You grabbed your tight end in the 4th round, right? So I need to 5th. So I'm looking to grab a tight end in the 5th round now. I'm taking notes.
Yeah, that's the one big thing that I changed and stuck to my guns, but with strategy this year, the latest that I kind of did the math, the latest I would grab is Zach Ertz. Feeling comfortable with that is my tight end 1. But in this, I feel like you want to just go ahead and find that good value tight end that can make you feel solidified at the position.
Yeah.
As we wrap up the show, I want to give you 3 of my kind of league winner type players. One is Rashad Penny there in Seattle. I think this is Kenneth Walker's backfield next year. I said we cannot discredit what Rashad Penny did last year as far as the yards per attempt, the fantasy production he put up towards the end. You're getting him in the 9th round or later in a lot of these drafts. Nice. So he's one of those guys going to be a league winner. And then I'm going to turn my attention to Green Bay, where Allen Lazard has absolutely the ability to be a league winner, as well as, dare I say it, Sammy Watkins. just simply because there's nobody else there. And trust me, it feels so dirty coming out of my mouth to say Sammy Watkins, but I don't trust Christian Watson quite yet for this year. I don't know if Romeo Dubes is quite ready this year. Alan Lazard is going to be a big-time player for this Packers.
What about the other Rodgers? I kind of like that other Rodgers, that slot receiver in there.
I don't know. I'm not a big fan of Amari quite yet because he's out of Clemson. I got this, you know what I mean. But here's what I'm going to leave you with. Though. If you haven't done your draft yet, if you haven't started, maybe if I look at mine and I'm doing hindsight is 2020, maybe the one thing I take a look at is not drafting a single wide receiver until the 6th, 7th, 8th, maybe even the 9th round, kind of in that range, because you're getting guys like Terry McLaurin in the 6th. You're getting Brandon Cooks in the 7th, possibly getting pushed down, as well as Marquise Brown, DK Metcalf. In the 8th, guys like Darnell Mooney, Jerry Jeudy, they're getting pushed down there as well. And then in the 9th round, you're looking at guys like Hunter Renfrow, Christian Kirk, possibly Amari Cooper if you believe that he's going to do something in Cleveland. There is value getting pushed down at the wide receiver position. That's why I believe you got to get a quarterback in the first 2-3 rounds, wherever that value kind of goes for you right there. Load up on running back, grab that tight end before the 6th round or in the 6th round, depending on how that tight end push is going. But the one thing I'm going to leave everyone with right now as they go into the Scott Fish Bowl is, hey, completion percentages matter for these quarterbacks. There's an extra bonus point for over 66% completion rate
the hard way.
per game. So you want to get in on that and wait on wide receivers. You can do that. There's a lot of good value to be had in the 6th, 7th, 8th round when you can load up the top end of your roster. With that all being said, this has been the Dynasty Vipers ViperCast, episode number 138, a Scott Fish Bowl 12 special occasion, breaking it all down for you. And as always, presented by the Fantasy Points Media Group. Enter promo code VIPERS22 and get yourself 10% off today. See you next week.